Good morning, everyone. 7:30 a.m. here in Spokane, Washington at the Spokane of English Language Studios. It's good to see you here again. It's good to see you here always. It's very cold here this morning. Very, very cold. It feels like autumn. It feels like fall. I think today is what is it today? The 14th? And we have about 8 more days, about one more week until the official start of fall, of autumn. So it's very, very cold in the morning and very, very hot in the afternoon. It's impossible to dress for the weather. I have to dress very warmly, wear a jacket. I almost put on my coat, my winter coat this morning, but in the afternoon, I wish I was wearing a t-shirt and shorts. So that's the weather here. Anwar, good morning. Zayed, good morning. See Swati's here, Miguel, Rosa, Hannah, good morning. Oh, it's good to see everybody again. Oh boy, again, you're gonna have to help me with these names. Junyat, Junayt. Tan, good morning. Good morning, everybody from Istanbul. Oh, it's still hot in Istanbul. I bet it's still hot in Istanbul. The weather is changing here. The weather is changing drastically. It's changing quite a bit. Mala, welcome. Good morning. Before I start the lesson, I want to remind you that this is the last of my open classes. I've had a lot of fun working with you, but some of these streaming classes are going to be closed. I'm going to put it up in the background again. So if you look behind me, and I'll put this link in the chat. Some of these open classes are going to go to closed. It's an invite-only class. The invite-only classes will be 12 weeks long. So they'll run from now until September, beginning next week. There will be 2 hours for each class, 2 hours a week, live like we do now. But what's going to be different is there will be assignments. There will be assignments and homework, which the teacher will mark, so you'll receive feedback. Teachers will give you comments and advice and correct mistakes. There'll be quizzes each week. There'll be a final exam. There'll be a final. And then you will get a certificate. If you want to know more information, follow that link. There is a pre-intermediate English, which is a lower level English. There's intermediate, let me try that word again. There's an intermediate English class, and you may recognize Mark because he's been doing this for a long time. And then my class will be an upper intermediate class. So there's different levels. If you are interested in these classes, please pick the one which you feel would be right for you. We also have English for academic purposes, which is an even higher level, and that'll be taught by Josh. And then finally, a more topic or subject-specific class. It will be English for health sciences with Sagan. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 classes. I should say the pre-intermediate is taught by Nicole. So 5 classes. Please take a look. I've had a lot of fun doing these open classes, but the format is changing now. And it would be great to see some of you next week in these closed classes. If you have more questions, of course, you can ask Zach. I'm putting Zach up for offer. If you have any questions, please ask Zach. Speaking of Zach, in the class notes for this class, I've included a couple of contact information a couple addresses where you can contact Zach. So in these videos, if you watch these videos later, you probably hear me refer to Zach a couple times and you're wondering, who's that? Well, it's this guy, and I'll include these in the class notes so you can contact him. Also included in the class notes will be the address to that live class. Okay, well, I'm excited to get started. Here we go. Okay, Zach says, yeah, he's ready for it. Ask him as many questions as you want. Bombard Zach with questions. Ask him about these live classes. He knows all about it. He's the expert. Okay, let's get started. Are you ready to get started? Okay, here we go. I'm on Smrt right now. I'm gonna use the Smrt curriculum, and if you've been watching these videos or you're new to the videos, you're probably wondering, what's Smrt? Well, Smart's the curriculum we use, and it's all online. As you see, there is a ton of lessons on Smrt. If you have access to it now, I am on 2-3 commas, writing 2-3 commas at the 125 levels, and then I'm going to open it, and it'll be on the background behind me. Okay, there's so many rules for commas. That's what's difficult about them. They're used in many situations. It's a punctuation that doesn't have just one use. Periods only have a couple of uses. Periods are easy, but commas are not easy because they have a lot of uses. And it gets kind of confusing. Not only that, there are also style rules to commas. Style rules are rules where you have a choice, which is a bizarre thing. You would think in a language you don't have a choice when to use punctuation, but commas you do. We're going to look at some useful and common uses of commas. Are they important? A lot of people feel they are not important. They are extremely important. I know even in America, a lot of Americans, when they write, don't feel commas are important. They say bad things about the commas, but they're actually extremely, extremely important. And I don't mean that just from a teacher's perspective, but from any perspective. I think I saw who had the joke. Yeah, Rosa, you typed the joke. Let's look at that. There are some jokes you can tell with commas. If you look at these two sentences in the background, these two example sentences, you'll kind of see why. It's kind of a funny way to look at why commas are important. Let's eat, comma, grandma. Let's eat grandma. Of course, this sentence means you're telling grandma it's time to eat. And this one kind of sounds like you're telling your family to eat grandma, like for dinner. You don't want to eat grandma. That's disgusting. That's gross. So yes, commas are important. Commas are important. A comma may save your grandma's life. So yes, commas are very, very important. Okay. The first rule I want you to know, and hopefully you can see that in the background. Let me know if it's too small or not. List. A list of things. So for example, and I'll take this example off Smrt here, he likes rock, hip hop, jazz, and country. All genres of music. He likes rock, hip hop, jazz, and country. Notice where the commas go. After each item in the list, comma, comma. But here, before the conjunction and, no comma. So for the last two things in your list, you do not need a comma. But everything before, you do need the comma. He likes rock, comma, hip hop, comma, jazz, no comma, and country. Okay, there's a question here from Sawati. Let's see. Sawati, I'm gonna copy your sentence here and paste it in so I can take a better look at it. Oh, okay. We're going to cover this rule. We'll cover this rule later, but I can go ahead and talk about that now. Let me resize this, make it a little bigger. I try to remember that when all I can see is the woman who sat by, blank and unreachable, while her children turned to skin and bones. Okay. If you interrupt the normal grammar of a sentence, if you insert a word or a phrase where usually one would not go, you want to surround that by commas. Who sat by, here we have a phrasal verb, sat by, while. While is kind of one of those linking words. A subordinate clause word, usually between whatever you have at the end of your sentence, who sat by, and this is of course this is a complex, is this a complex sentence? Might be more, is it a complex compound? It's a difficult sentence, whatever it is. So this phrasal verb appears in an adjective clause, and then we have a subordinate clause word. Usually we would not put anything in between those. We would not want to put anything in between those. But here we have a couple of adjectives. So yes, we want to use the commas to separate the adjectives because they are in an unusual place. And we'll take a look at that later. We'll take a look at some more examples of that later. Another question, this is from Donnie D. Hi, Donnie D. Don't you believe in the Oxford comma? Do I believe in the Oxford comma? I, of course, love the Oxford comma. And this is when I talked about style rules. This is a style rule. Some people use it, some people don't. Some regions or countries are more likely to use it, some are not. It feels like now, trends in writing, the Oxford comma has fallen out of use. So some people like to put that comma before the last thing in the list. So with the Oxford comma, it'd be he likes rock, comma, hip hop, comma, jazz, comma, and country. But it is not necessary. Let me show you an example of where it would be a little more useful and where I might employ the use of the Oxford comma, where I might use the Oxford comma. So I'm going to write a list sentence myself. I went to the store and bought bread, comma, peanut butter and jelly, comma, and bananas. Okay. Here, before the last thing in my list, before the last conjunction, and bananas, the last thing in my list, I put a comma. And the reason I put a comma is I have another conjunction. I have another and here. Peanut butter and jelly. These two things, at least in America, and you may have heard this before or even tried one of these sandwiches before, very popular type of sandwich, peanut butter and jelly. So often when we talk about those two items of food, we pair them together. We do not separate them. So I put these two together, and because I have two ands like that, and this and is putting these two items together, I felt like I really needed the Oxford comma, so it didn't turn out to be peanut butter and jelly and bananas. So there's a pause there. Peanut butter and jelly and bananas. One thing I hear a lot is you should put a comma where you would naturally take a breath, where you would slow down and take a breath when you are speaking. That is not how commas are used. However, that being said, when you read a sentence containing a comma, you do want to take a pause. I went to the store and bought bread, peanut butter and jelly, and bananas. So when you read aloud a sentence with a comma, you do want to pause. However, when you speak and you're trying to write like you speak, do not put a comma every place you would take a pause. There are rules to using commas and writing rules, grammar rules to using commas. One of them, remember, is list. Remember the list rule. Mohammed, I see you're really struggling with your writing skills, but this channel has been a help. That's good to hear. Writing is very, very difficult. It's taken me most of my life to become a good writer, to become a better writer. It's taken perseverance, meaning I didn't quit, I kept doing it, and to this day I still do it. I write every week. I try to write maybe about 4 to 5, sometimes 6 pages a week, at least. If I don't have a project I'm working on that forces me to write, I force myself to write, because writing is practice, practice, practice. Think of it like the piano, or learning the guitar, or practicing a martial art like karate or kung fu. Practice, 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 practice. Zach is sad because he still can't write. Zach, with practice you can write. It's always about that practice and making mistakes and fixing mistakes, editing. A lot of writing is editing as well, and drafting. I see here Salima has written a sentence, an example sentence with a list, which I like. I like the list. So I'm going to blow this up. I'm going to make it bigger. He speaks French, Italy, Spanish, and English. So here we have the name of 4 languages. Italy is the country. Does anybody know the adjective form that would give us the name of the language? So French, of course, comes from France. Spanish comes from Spain. English from England. What language comes from Italy? What do we call that language? I'm asking you out there. I'm asking you in the chat room. What language comes from Italy? What's the name of that language? I'm going to sip on my coffee while you think about that. What language comes from Italy? But a very good sentence. We have 4 languages, no Oxford comma, and that's okay. Spanish and English, between the 2 things. Dina, am I saying that right? Dina or Dinah? Please correct me as always. Italian, that's correct, Italian. Yes, good, Alvaro, good, everybody knew, Italian, good. Remember, language names are also adjectives, which are great. So if you need an adjective for a country, just think of the language from that country, and you also have the adjective form. Of course, a country is always a noun. Dina, or again, Dinah, please let me know how to pronounce your name. Oh yeah, Zach, it's cold, but I have an iced coffee. Yes, I loved iced coffee, even in cold weather. But here's how bad I am. both an iced coffee and a hot coffee. I love my coffee. I love my coffee. Okay, let me get to this question. Do we really need to put a comma or not before the conjunction and in a simple sentence? In a simple sentence, no, we do not need to put a comma before the and. In a compound sentence, yes. And we'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at that too. Why do we use commas sometimes before and? In a compound sentence, meaning you will have subject and verb on one side of the and a subject, oh, I forget I'm reversed. Let me try that again. A subject and verb on one side of the and a subject and verb on the other side of the and. So you will have two independent clauses with a conjunction in the middle, and we'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at that. Okay, here we go. Taking a look at it. I think you've got the list thing down. I think you've got the list thing down, but let's take maybe an example of one more. Take an example of one more. Actually, I lied, two more. Let's take a look at two more examples. Examples, examples, examples. I love to show examples. That's how I best learn. The car drove off the road, comma, through the fence, comma, down the hill and into a clearing. Notice this list. It's an interesting list. Off the road, through the fence, down the hill and into a clearing. Here, no Oxford comma before the and. So we have prepositions: off, through, down, into. So if you have prepositional phrases in a list, separate with a comma. Separate with a comma. How does the iced coffee taste? Delicious. Iced coffee is delicious. Cool and refreshing. Cool and refreshing. And of course, this one's packed with sugar. In America, so much sugar in our coffee. So much sugar in our coffee. Not just shots of coffee, but also loaded with syrup and sugar. So it's a real rocket blast into the morning. Okay, let's look at one more example of a sentence showing a list broken by commas. I shouldn't say broken. The sentence is not broken. Just the parts of the sentence. The list is broken by commas. France is famous for its pastry, comma. Italy is renowned for its pasta, and Switzerland is known for its chocolate. Notice there are three independent clauses. France is subject-verb. Italy is subject-verb. Switzerland is subject-verb. And also, I guess I could, and then after adjectives. Okay, never mind. So three independent clauses. Sorry, I'm just talking to myself here. France is, Italy is, Switzerland is. But it's a list. It's a list. So you want to break with this comma, and again, no comma before the last and. So anytime you have a sentence containing a list, use those commas, and at the end, here is, I'm going to say it again, a style rule. Now, not even a rule, style. The Oxford comma is about style. Choose the style which is correct for you, which you feel comfortable with, which you like, and stick with it. Don't change it from one sentence to the other. Once you know your style, Oxford comma or no Oxford comma, choose one as your style and stick to it. That's the important thing about style. Once you choose it, don't change it. Because then you'll just confuse anybody who's reading what you're writing. They'll wonder, why did they use it here and not here? That's the important thing about style. Okay, let's look at the next reason. Oh, there's Sean. Hi, Sean. There's his picture. Of course, on the Smrt curriculum, we have videos, so you don't just read, you also can watch the videos that have the lessons. Just like now you're watching my video. The service at this restaurant is great, and the food is delicious. I think this is what you were asking before. Had a couple questions about this before. Okay, here's our and, but now we have a comma before the and. And remember, the comma does come before the conjunction. The comma does come before the conjunction. Hello, CF Teaching. Good to see you here again. Achille. Comma is my Achilles heel. The comma is tricky. I said that at the beginning. The comma is tricky because so many rules. We're on the second rule. Remember, if you have this conjunction, put the comma before. Now, this is not a list, like we talked about before. This is not a list. The service at this restaurant is great. This whole thing, the service at this restaurant, is the subject of the first part of my sentence. Is the verb, of course. Then we have an adjective, great. The service at this restaurant is great. That's an independent clause. We have subject-verb agreement on one side, but on the other side we have another subject, the food, and another verb. Maybe instead of underlining everything, maybe it's time to color code. Service at this restaurant, let's make that blue. The food, also another subject, so I'll make it blue. And then I'll make the verbs, oh, I don't know, I like green. I'll make the verbs green. Is that hard to read? Might be a little hard to read, but it's just a little verb, is. Okay, so if you have subject verb on one side, subject verb on the other, and a conjunction in the middle, comma. Make sure to include that comma before the conjunction. What are conjunctions? What are coordinating? What we call coordinating conjunctions? That's a good question. There are 7 of them. I like to remember them as the fanboys. I like to remember them as the fanboys. That's how I remember them. F-A-N-B-O-Y-S. That helps me remember my 7 coordinating conjunctions. We have for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. They're all coordinating conjunctions. For, when you use it as a coordinating conjunction, because for has many meanings, means because. Okay, Steve Lynn, you have a question. I'm going to get to that question in a second. I think you all know the meaning of and. Nor is often paired with the word neither. So when you remember that N in fanboys, remember neither nor. And it's kind of a negative or. But I think you know. Or I think you know. Yet is like but. And so, I think you know. And if you don't know, go ahead and tell me. Okay, Steve, you're asking about that previous sentence. This one, the service at the restaurant is great, and the food is delicious. Can we write it as the service at the restaurant is great and the food delicious? Boy, that's a great question. That's a fantastic question. I'm going to say informally, yes. Formally, no. This is a fine informal sentence, but by the formal grammar rules, no, we cannot write this. Why? Why? If you don't have that independent clause on one side and that independent clause on the other side, this and needs to link the food with something before in this part. So what I mean by that is it would have to make sense in this sense. We would have to be able to take this second part of the sentence and have it match up or be able to replace something in the first part of the sentence. And here it does not work. I'll try to think of an example. Maybe an easy example will help illustrate this. Okay, here's a very easy example. I wish I could think of a more difficult example, but it's early in the morning. I like to play baseball and basketball. Okay, it's a list, but when we don't have a comma before the conjunction, that second thing grammatically needs to match something here. So if I like to play baseball, let's say I did not have a list. This and basically means basketball should work grammatically with something before in the sentence, and it does. I could simply say, I like to play basketball. So here, if we have a conjunction, this part needs to match grammatically or be able to be inserted, put in somewhere, and have it make grammatical sense in here. And that's why I say formally, no, this does not work. Informally, yes. I think you would see something like this in print in a newspaper or magazine because it makes sense. Even without the hard formal grammar rule, it makes sense. It's easy to understand. So if a sentence is easy to understand, even if it doesn't follow all the rules, you will see things like that in print. And it's more poetic. It would be considered more poetic writing. I hope that's a long explanation, but I hope it helps. So yes, sometimes informal English is okay in writing. Never for your essays in university, never for your thesis papers, never for your doctoral. However, if you're writing an article or a blog entry and you want to be more poetic in your writing, yes, informal English is okay. You put comma when you're adding information. Yes, CF teaching, and we haven't got to that rule yet, but you do use a comma when you're adding information. And, okay, you're going to have to help me with your name. Is it Erdogan? Erdogan? I'm just reading it phonetically in English. Erdogan. I'm learning a lot of names. By teaching this class, I'm learning so many names. Okay, the house, which is damaged in, and we need an article here because storms are countable. You can have more than one storm. So I'm going to say the storm. The house which is damaged in the storm has a big garden. Is this sentence okay? Yes, this sentence is great. It's fantastic. Here we have an adjective clause which describes the house. So when we have an adjective clause, and it's what we call non-essential, it's extra information. It's not necessary information. And many adjective clauses are considered extra information. So this is extra information, separated on both sides by a comma. Excellent. Yes, this is an excellent sentence. Very, very good. How can we test If it's okay, just take it out. The house has a big garden. That is also an excellent grammatical sentence. However, if we want to say more about the house, comma, adjective clause, end with a comma. Good. Good, good, good. Welcome, Sissy. I see Mutaz is here as well. I'm glad you could join me this morning. We're talking about commas, of course. Okay, let's look at one more of the linking type. The linking type with the coordinating conjunction. Remember, coordinating conjunction are the fanboys. For and nor, but, or, yet, so. The fanboys. If you can remember this, you can remember the 7 coordinating conjunctions. I think this is the trickiest one. Remember, for means because. The government, I always misspeak. Let me try that again. Let me take a sip of coffee. The government has made an effort to promote healthy eating, but it seems to have made little difference. All right, the government, and let me use my color code again, subject, has made, verb. So here we have subject-verb agreement. We're going to have an independent clause, and then an object, a very long object for the sentence, an effort to promote healthy eating, comma, before the conjunction, and here we have the coordinating conjunction, but, it, subject, seems. I'll make that my verb, seems to have made little difference. So we have subject-verb agreement, subject-verb agreement. If we separate those with the coordinating conjunction, always 100%, comma before the coordinating conjunction. And the name for these are compound sentences. These are called compound sentences, no longer simple sentences. Compound sentences. 2 subject plus verb agreements separated by a coordinating conjunction. These are compound sentences. CF teaching, and when the added info is not independent. Oh, okay. So you're asking like the adjective clause. When is the adjective clause necessary? And we cannot use commas. Okay, let me think of an example again. And CF teaching's question, let me put it up, because it is a good question. When are, and let's just talk about adjective clauses for now. When are adjective clauses necessary? Meaning, when they are necessary, we cannot use commas. No, that wouldn't work. Let me think. Well, I always think of this outrageous example. So see if you can follow my logic on this outrageous example. I always give my sentences, my students. Okay, let's look at these 2 sentences. Same sentence, both are correct, but because one of them I did not use comma, it means I think that this adjective clause is essential. It's necessary. I could not make sense of this sentence without it. And then this one, I did put commas. So what this means essentially is no commas. The man who is wearing a yellow hat. I'm using the fact that he's wearing a yellow hat as the identifier for that man. I need to ID that man. I need to be able to recognize that man because of his yellow hat, not because of the monkey. This might mean in the same room, there's a man with a red hat holding a monkey and a man with a blue hat holding a monkey. No, that wouldn't be right, is it? Yeah, that's right. Or let's use different animals. There's a man with a red hat holding a koala. There's a man with a blue hat holding a baby kangaroo, which we call a joey. So different men with different colored hats holding animals. I want you to focus on the man with the yellow hat. So this becomes an identifier for that man. It is important for you to know the man I'm talking about by the yellow hat. This sentence, the sentence with the commas, the yellow hat is not important to identify the man. What is important is the monkey. You can identify him because he's holding a monkey. So when we use the commas, we're saying not important information. I want you to focus on this part. The man is holding a monkey. This is extra information. It is providing more detail. This one, it's not just a detail, it's important to identify the man I'm talking about. And that's the difference between using commas or no commas with an adjective clause. You feel the adjective clause is necessary to identify the noun that comes before. Does that make sense? Okay. Ankit Raj, I am very confused while writing an article about something I do not understand which tense is used throughout the writing process. Okay, this is a good question as well. If you are writing about an article, if you're writing about something, oftentimes, even if the writer is dead, passed away, and the article is very old, we write about the article in the present tense, at least at the academic level. So, and I'm going to make something up here because I don't have time to do research. In his article, notice I used a comma, and we haven't got to that rule yet. In his article, let's say, I don't know if this exists. Again, I don't know if this exists. In his article, Quantum Physics, Einstein states, I don't know, electrons can jump freely between, boy, science is not my strong suit, between levels. Okay, this is a ridiculous sentence. I am not a science teacher. However, what I want to illustrate is using tense. Even if somebody is dead, and Albert Einstein is dead, and even if they wrote, and I might even put more, which he wrote in 1939, in his article, Quantum Physics, which he wrote in 1939, Einstein states, electrons, and I might even replace that colon with a comma. Look how many commas I've used in this sentence. In his article, Quantum Physics, which he wrote in 1939, Einstein states, electrons can jump freely between levels. So, you ask about verb tense in writing about articles. Maybe you don't even understand. You just want to pull a quote. Academically, present tense. However, if I want to write about history, if my focus is history, this sentence, if I use the past tense, now I'm talking about his history, almost his biography maybe, or when he did things chronologically. So if history is my focus, past tense. However, if ideas are my focus, ideas that exist in articles, present tense. I think, is that the question you're asking? And CF teaching, if we may misplace the commas, it can lead to misunderstanding. It can. There's a book called Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. I believe that's the name of it. I think, hopefully I'm remembering the title of the book correctly. Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. This was a sign outside of a panda enclosure at the zoo. And there's even a misspelling. What they meant to say was eats, shoots, and leaves. I believe they want this spelling of, and it shouldn't even be capitalized. I have to look this up. Sometimes I have to do research. Eats, do pandas eat shoots? Yeah, I'm getting okay, eat shoots and leaves. Maybe, I'm not sure how to spell the plant shoot. I'm gonna just stick with this one. So maybe there's not a misspelling. However, but I digress. Getting back to my point. If we have the comma here, it means the panda's doing three actions. The panda's eating, the panda's shooting a gun, and then walking away. Without the comma, the panda is eating two things, shoots and leaves, off a plant, off of like a bamboo plant. So yes, commas can lead to misunderstandings. This one, eats, comma, shoots and leaves, three actions. This one, eating two things. Youssef, today the article is about commas. The article is about commas. Speaking of which, let's get to another rule. Okay, we have the coordinating conjunction. Introduction. Introduce or introduction. If at the beginning of a sentence you have something before the subject and it's not an adjective describing that subject, it's called an introductory element or an introduction to your sentence. And it's very, very common to have introduction. Let's look at an example. This one is using the word however. However, comma, his father was not willing to let him go that far from home. And of course, when we use this at the beginning of the sentence, it means, however, means there's something came before. We would need a sentence before. Stephen loved to ride his bike, period. However, comma, his father was not willing to let him go that far from home. If you have something before the subject, and I'll color code the subject again, his father was, and I'll include that negative, was not or wasn't, as part of the verb. If you have something before the subject of your sentence and it is not an adjective describing that sentence, please separate it with a comma. And Donnie, that's a good question. If I started a sentence with yesterday, should I put a comma? Maybe. Yesterday could be the subject of your sentence. Yesterday was sunny. And that's the subject, and here's the verb. Yesterday was sunny. However, if yesterday is not your subject, yesterday, comma, I felt warm because it was sunny. It's not part of the subject I. So therefore, we would want to separate with a comma. Now, in writing, if you read a book, a newspaper, a magazine, you might see where there's no comma. Again, we're getting to what's called style. And there's a very weird style suggestion. I personally, as a teacher, as a writer, I personally always use the comma before an introductory element that comes before the subject. Always, 100% of the time. However, you will see some people that say, if your introduction before the subject is 4 or less words, do not use a comma. 5 words or more, use a comma. This is very unusual. This is a style suggestion. It's very unusual. They're just saying, if your introduction looks long, put a comma. If it looks short, don't put a comma. I think that's a terrible style suggestion. I don't agree with it. I say always put a comma after your introductory element before a subject, because that way you can eliminate all confusion. And it's also a good place to take a breath. If you ever have to read something out loud from a book or something you've written and you have to read it out loud, it gives you another time to pause, gives you another time to pause. Yesterday, remember, when you read out loud, pause at the comma. Yesterday, I felt warm because it was sunny. Rosa asks, do we use a space between a comma and the following word? Do we use a space between a comma and the following word? Yes, always. One space. Before, no. So the words and then the comma goes with the word. No space, and only one space afterwards. And that's always with a comma. No space before, one space after. So the spacing rule is always the same. No matter how you use a comma, where or when you use a comma, no space before, one space after. So that's kind of easy. The spacing rule is easy to remember because it's always the same. Okay, what time? Oh my gosh. Are we running out of time almost? We've hardly gotten to any rules. Okay, I'm going to quickly go over. Oh, there's the Smrt Cafe, by the way. If you have access and you want to look at the Smrt Cafe, we always post videos there. Okay, one more. How about one more rule, and then I want you to look at some exercises, even though we haven't covered all the rules. Go back to the class notes. And we're going to call this the add rule. The add rule. Meaning when we want to add information in a place information would not usually go, you want to use commas on both sides. His father, subject of the sentence, was not, verb of the sentence. Usually between subject and verbs, we do not put anything. We do not want to interrupt. We can with like an adverb or an adjective clause or even something called an appositive, but usually we do not separate subject and verb. However, using the word however, if we do want to break that and add a word, we can. And now we need to put commas on both sides. His father, comma, remember no space before, one space after. However, and again with this comma, no space before, one space after, was not. So here we've separated the subject and verb to put in that word, however, and notice on this word, or in this sentence, we put however at the beginning of the sentence. However is movable. Here, This writer put it between the subject and verb. So yes, we want to put the commas because normally we would never separate a subject and verb. We are adding information. Okay, I want you to look at some sentences where the commas have been removed. There are no commas. And I'm guessing I want to know where you would put the commas. So I'm going to put it behind me. I'm going to put it behind me here. I want to know where you would put the commas. I guess you can say after, and then you can list the words where you think the commas would go after. Does that make sense? So for example, if I showed you this sentence, you would say the comma should go after father and however. English is crazy. It is. All languages are kind of crazy, Rosa. There's so many rules involved. There are writing rules that apply to grammar rules, that apply to speaking rules. All languages are a little crazy. A set of codes. All languages are a set of codes, and it's just slowly cracking the code. It's slowly cracking the code. Cracking the code, solving the puzzle. And it's a slow process. And I see a lot of the same people here. I know you're working hard on your English, and it just takes that work, constantly doing it, and you slowly crack the code. And I'm still working on it. I've studied English, and I'm still working on it. It's a lifelong process. Learning language, multiple languages, is a lifelong process. Learning your own language is a lifelong process. So never give up. Hopefully you'll find enjoyment in it. You'll find resources that help you, like this class. And remember, these open classes are becoming closed classes. And please ask Zach questions about that if you have questions. Okay, in the last remaining minutes, because I promised it, let's take a look at some examples. Where do you think the comma should go? I'll be right back. Okay, I'm seeing some of the correct answers already. One thing I forgot to do, make a copy. Let me make a copy of this exercise. Okay, here we go. I see some of you answered that a comma should go after William Faulkner. That's correct. As he read more of the story by William Faulkner, this as here means it will be a subordinate clause. So here we have subject verb, he read, but before it we have this subordinating word, as he read more of the story by William Faulkner. So where is our next subject verb? Right here, he had. So because we have all of this before the subject, this is an introductory element and a subordinating clause, a subordinate clause, and therefore this is where the comma goes. Okay, his date wore a beautiful green gown. Let me try that again. His date wore a beautiful green gown and bright red shoes to the prom. So here, good, Steve Lynn, that's correct. I see you put no commas. No commas here. We only have two things in the list: a beautiful green gown and bright red shoes. If you have two things in a list, no comma. Ever, no comma for just two things in a list. C, how often, he asked, as casually as he could, do earthquakes happen in this region? So here, before he asked, now here's something I want you to notice. The comma goes inside the quotation marks. Commas always go inside the quotation marks, just like this question mark goes inside the quotation marks. Other punctuation always goes inside the quotation marks. Before we have this, he asked, if you have somebody saying something, somebody asking something, you want to separate what they say from the he asked, or she said, or they yelled. Always break the words from who said it and how they said it. And then after could, do earthquakes happen in this region? Now, why did we put a comma here? Because we split the words that were said. So if you do this, if you split the quote, then you want to put a comma on each side. That one's difficult. Okay. Mukhtar, is your internet slow? Or hopefully I'm not slow on this side. Internet slow? Let's see, what else do we have? Mukhtar, I'm sorry it's coming in slow. I'm sorry it's coming in slow as a turtle. Remember, you can always watch these videos later on YouTube. Bosses who treat their employees with respect will often find that respect returned. Now again, you have to think, is this necessary or unnecessary? This adjective clause describing bosses. Necessary or unnecessary? Some people would say unnecessary. I'm going to say, for me, if I wrote this sentence, I would not use commas. I would say it's necessary. Why? Because bosses who treat their employees with respect, these specific kind of bosses are the bosses who will often find that respect returned. Different bosses who do not treat their employees with respect, will not get it returned. So if I wrote this sentence, bosses will often find that respect returned, it doesn't really make sense. What respect? What respect are they talking about? I would say this is necessary, therefore no commas. I'm talking about a specific set of bosses who treat their employees with respect. Victoria, British Columbia, located on Vancouver Island, is the provincial capital and a popular tourist destination. Did you guess after Victoria, British Columbia and after Vancouver Island? If you did, you're correct. Why again? Well, this is the subject, Victoria, British Columbia. This is the verb. And I put something between the subject and verb. So, commas on both sides. Okay, I gotta go. I ran over time. Thank you for sticking around. Again, remember, check out these live classes at smartenglish.com, SCEL Live. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to drink more coffee now. I hope you had a good time. I hope you learned something about commas. Bye-bye. Bye-bye for now. Have a fantastic Wednesday or Thursday if you're getting close to Thursday. Thanks, Zach. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.